Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini here with the eccentric Charles Coulombe.
Eccentric.
Eccentric?
How do you mean eccentric?
I mean,
Weird?
a little weird.
Nuts?
Yeah, I mean, nuts is a...
Whack job?
Yeah, in that neighborhood.
I say off the rails?
Off the rails, yeah.
Off the reservation?
Good. Yeah, now you're cooking.
Out of control?
Yeah.
Fat, bloated?
No.
And out of control like the federal budget?
Like the federal budget? Where did that go from?
Well, I think it was Reagan said that Tip O'Neill was like the federal budget. Fat, bloated, and out of control.
Wow.
But no, well, that's... where do you come up with this eccentric thing? Who's telling you this crap?
Well, you wrote a piece for Crisis Publications, and...
I have a right to. They employ me.
Some of these mainstream people... mainstream people don't like that you're writing for Crisis now because you're an eccentric.
Mainstream people. Mainstream. You mean the folks that are after gender-specific bathrooms?
No, they're
mainstream. They're the ones in charge.
No, they wouldn't associate with them. They're defenders of tradition, in the right way, not in an eccentric way.
I see. But is the mainstream eccentric?
Well, I guess so.
So basically, there's this little area they've chipped out of mainstream trattery.
Yeah.
So that's like being the sane nut.
No, it's just the perfect level of moderation.
The tallest pygmy.
I think that's an unfair characterization.
Shortest giant.
Well, they might like that one a little bit more.
Thinnest fat man.
Thinnest fat man.
Fattest thin man.
Okay, now you're confusing me now. I don't even know what these things mean.
Confusion is the guardian of truth.
Ah, yes.
So basically what they've done is create a parameter of views which are okay, and all others are wrong.
Well, their parameter of views perfectly coincided with the light of God's truth.
Who told them that?
God.
So they're getting visions now, are they?
No, they're just following the
interlocutions.
They're just following the magisterium, Charles.
Oh, they are? Which one? They are following our Holy Father, Pope Francis, then. I didn't think so. So whence comes this para-magisterium, or if you prefer, this pagisterium, short for the portmanteau para-magisterium? Whence comes this separate area of truth that they're deriving from? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying help me understand. They're not getting it from the Holy Father and the ordinary magisterium. So where's it coming from?
Well,
yes.
I think my devil's advocacy is running at its course here.
So they get it from their own opinions.
I was actually going to say something else. I was going to say that they get it from their American programming.
Well, it could be. I mean, programming does tend to form our opinions.
Yeah.
But what am I eccentric about?
That you want to restore a monarchy.
It doesn't have to be restored. It already is.
What, the Holy Roman Empire?
No, the kingship of Christ.
Oh, the kingship of Christ.
Yeah, president of presidents, bureaucrat of bureaucrats, like it says in the Bible.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I know who you mean. But for all of you out there who consider my views eccentric, I'm going to clue you in on something. If you're watching this, and you consider yourself a believing Catholic, you're eccentric as far as the people who matter are concerned. Now, I understand that there is what I like to call the battered dwarf syndrome, which is, if a dwarf gets kicked around all the time, God help any toddler that comes across his path. The kid's toast. And I get it. It's perfectly natural, and I understand and accept it. But it's not what I would call laudable.
Laudable.
Laudable. I mean to say, you see a dwarf beating up on some 4-year-old. You know why he's doing it. You understand?
Yeah, you see that all the time.
Yeah, well, especially around here. But you wouldn't consider that an admirable trait.
It's true.
You'd understand it. If you're the 5-year-old in question, you might someday forgive it. But you could never say it was laudable. So, if you feel that I'm eccentric, you may well be right. I can't deny it. But what about you? What would your masters regard you as?
So they're the dwarf, you're the child in this?
No, you could read it that way if you wanted.
Okay.
Or vice versa. But that's why I make a point of not beating up on other trads.
Okay.
For one thing, no matter how much I may disagree with them, they're not running the show. They're not responsible for the situation we're in. So why should I get myself bent out of shape because someone disagrees with me who's as powerless as I am to affect anything? Why would I do that?
I don't think that's true.
But that I'm not powerless, or that...
that they have no impact. Father Ripperger says that we're not recouping tradition as quickly enough because we aren't that shining city on the hill.
I'm sure that's true. But the point I'm making is the reason why I'm not going after other people for not being as perfect as I am is precisely because they can't affect the macrocosm.
Ah, I see.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to argue with Father as far as the necessity for each of us to do our part in the immediate, but that's not my point.
Yeah.
Except to say that what if somebody disagrees with me and I go on a search and destroy mission to blacken their reputation and destroy everything they're doing and destroy whatever good they're doing? What then?
Well, you'd probably be doing that with the best of intentions to protect the sacredness of the magisterium.
Oh, okay, well...
You'd be a crusader.
Ah, I see. So I could feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Okay, well, never mind.
Well, no,
forget everything I was going to say.
Not
right.
so you could feel good about yourself. I mean, you would feel good about yourself as a byproduct of doing God's holy will.
As interpreted by me.
Well, is there someone else who can interpret that for you? It's just discerning the Holy Spirit. We all have to discern.
All true. All true. But just make sure it's the Holy Spirit you're listening to. And if you're feeling strange compulsions to do odd things in the middle of the night, that's not the Holy Spirit. If you're hearing voices that tell you to slow down on the freeway or come to a direct stop, no. Well, you see the bumper sticker. I brake for hallucinations.
I've never seen that.
Huh? We've never looked at my car then. Never mind.
Okay, so kind of on a...
I'll just say, my favorite bumper sticker of that kind?
What?
No restraining order can hold back my love.
I know who has that one.
That's
my favorite, too.
Yeah. Okay, what do we got in the real world?
So, in the real world, as we said, you are writing for Crisis now, and you're the European correspondent.
I are, but I'm on holiday right now, so I'm in the big nowhere.
But I just thought we'd leverage the show because you were asking on your Facebook if anybody has anything in the Europe scene.
I sure were.
Yeah.
I sure were. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a deep appeal from the newly minted European correspondent of Crisis Magazine. If there's anything you find of particular interest in, if you're in Europe, anywhere from Iceland to Russia or Portugal to Finland, if you're over there and something's going on that you find of interest and think I might want to share with my family of Crisis readers, go ahead and let me know. I certainly can't guarantee anything at all, but I will carefully look at all the stories that are sent me. If you like, you can kind of be my eyes and ears in the mother continent. Because there are all sorts of things going on right now that are very exciting, and I'm thrilled to be in this position.
How do you want people to contact you?
Ouija board, crystal ball.
Okay, through non-weird
methods.
Yeah.
You could send an email to Tumblr House.
It has to go through me?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Send it.
Doesn't the phrase "making extra work for you" mean anything to you?
Okay. Fine.
You have a whole bloody staff. I've got Zippo.
Send it through the contact form on the Tumblr House page. Contact us. Okay.
Thank you. What, do you think everybody's going to be, oh, you should go to the apple judging contest in Svanstadt? Do you really think you're going to be overwhelmed with that kind of thing? They're having a Miss Rheingold contest. That should be covered. You think they're actually going to be giving you that? I don't think so.
Okay.
I think our audience are too mature and too sane to send ideas for stories that are completely out of left field.
Okay.
I have that much respect and regard for our audience. I had thought you did too. I hope I wasn't mistaken.
How dare you? Okay.
I'm just saying I hope I wasn't mistaken. I didn't say I was mistaken.
Yeah, and I might believe you if you didn't purposefully roll your eyes after saying that.
What? You, a privileged executive in this firm, getting paranoid.
It's not paranoia if it's true.
Well, there's that.
If everyone is out to get you.
There's that. And this place has turned to a passion pit, hasn't it? Everyone's sabers everyone's knives are out for each other in the executive pool.
Well, that's how it is in this world.
Yeah, I saw Barney Hollingsworth got fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that to you?
Oh, nothing. God forbid I should ask. But no, I thought Barney was doing a fine job. I never quite knew what it was, but he had that the parking lot that where they've got the reserve parking. Mm-hmm. Right by the they've got that sort of it's like an ashtray set into the wall.
Yeah. As
you come in, and that parking spot, so you could actually just put your cigarette out the minute you got out of the car, and then you could get into the elevator and go upstairs. Well, he had that for the longest time.
Yeah.
And the first way I knew that he was on his way out was when the motor pool guys told me that you moved his parking space. That was the first indication I had there was any trouble with Barney's career.
Okay. Barney was looking for a change of scenery, and so we afforded him that opportunity, and we wish him the best of success.
You fired him!
That is that's actually libel. I could sue you for saying that right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was laid off.
You actually have no idea what happened, Charles.
No, I don't have any idea what happened. Barney's not talking. He said there's a non-disclosure agreement.
So, quit being a gossip girl or whatever, what have you.
Well, all right, never mind. All I can say is all the little Hollingsworths would sleep better tonight if their daddy had a job. I don't want you to feel guilty about that.
I wish him the best of success.
They had to leave San Marino. You know what that's like?
Oh, I know. That's so rough.
Did you see where they had to move? The dump they're living in now? In East Hollywood?
Audience doesn't want to hear about this, Charles.
All right, fine. Be that way.
Okay, so...
Charity begins at home.
Well, that's true.
Let him keep his company car.
That's the standard policy. That cannot happen.
All right, never mind. What's the next one? What's the question?
No, not quite. You're jumping the gun.
All right, fine.
You want to talk about your article? Go to the margins?
Ah, all right, I will.
Yeah.
You mean like Barney Hollingsworth is at now? All right, never mind. The point is, as we know, our Holy Father has called upon us to go to the margins. And he says that the credibility of the church rises or falls with how we treat the marginalized.
Oh.
Yes. I make the point that traditionalists, Eastern Rite Catholics, ethnic Catholics, Anglican Ordinariate people, contemplative nuns, they're all marginalized.
Eccentric monarchists?
Them too. All on the margins. And so the way they're treated directly affects the credibility of the church. And the Holy Father himself has said so. So you know it's true.
Good.
Yeah.
You're pretty happy with that, huh?
I'm very happy. Very, very happy. Because, a lot of people misunderstand my feelings in these areas. All I can say is that I completely and totally back up what the Holy Father said.
Good. Excellent.
Good.
All's well that ends well.
Yes, indeed. So long as it ends at some point. What else we got?
Okay, so everyone may have noticed a slight change in production value starting with last episode. We kind of worked the bugs out even more. The lighting is better. We saw some comments, so I'm glad you guys were able to discern the difference. The audio should be a lot better. We got a new microphone as well, so we hope you enjoy better audio this session.
And for those of you who were wondering if this bookcase is green screen, it's not. These are real books. Once upon a time when I was a kid, we did something called reading.
Mm-hmm.
And these books are actually real books. Oh, look, Tolkien: A Celebration.
Joseph Pierce?
It is, but I'm anthologizing here. The Lord of the Rings, a Catholic view.
How do you like that? Just
I do.
Casually have a Charles Coulombe book here.
Yeah. But see, this is a real book in a real shelf.
Yeah.
It's not a green screen.
But I do love the fact that we got some people to question reality.
Yeah. That's a great help. If this show has done nothing more than make you question whether or not you yourself are real,
yeah,
we do our best for you, gang.
But anyhow, talking again about the production value,
Oh.
I had to give up my I had to give up my lobster lunches for that. I went to the board and I said, we need this in the budget. I said, no, we can't do that. And they said, you have to give up something. I said, fine, okay, lobster lunches.
And Barney Hollingsworth.
But yeah, so I mean, you always criticize I'm not for the people. I sacrifice for the people.
And the people are grateful, I'm sure.
You know, now I have to settle for like filet mignon, steak, because it used to be surf and turf, incidentally. But I mean, the lobster just accentuates the steak so well. I mean, the steak is just so bland without the lobster.
Have you ever had Friday evening mackerel here?
No, but I've heard great things.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Oh, golly. Well, I'm sorry you've had to sacrifice, but no, it is true. It's very bright in here. What did one of the people say? Makes it look like a
1989 C-SPAN.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
I like that.
Well, we've caught up by only 3 more decades, and we'll be in 2019.
We're getting there. Yeah. So I was contemplating upgrading the video so that you could get our faces in ultra high mega definition, but then I thought, you know what? Maybe that's not the greatest idea.
No, we don't want you staring at my precancerous growths and say, those must be precancerous. What?
Yeah.
We don't want that.
But, so, if you guys still want video upgrade, do some rabble-rousing in the comments, and we'll see if we can do it. But if it's not important, we'll keep it this
We'll hurry
way.
along and do as we're doing.
Yeah. Let's see here. What else do we got? For Patron, we are only $100 away from the promised land. The land of milk and honey.
Ooh. 100 big ones.
So close. We've come so far to doing it every single Monday. So if it's Monday, it's off the menu.
Wow. You all want to come to the promised land. You want to cross that Jordan River. Oh, Lordy, you want to cross. You want to be seen in that land of milk and honey. Oh, can I have an amen?
Amen.
So, pay up. No, that sounds very bad. But anyway, yeah, we are pretty close to being able to do that, which will also be a miracle of engineering, given that I have only one more show to do here after this, and then it's back to fabulous Österreich. So, you know what to do, gang.
Yeah. One last thing before the questions. I have some merchandise to show off.
Oh, boy.
Look at this. What is this? This is a pillow. Probably the coolest pillow you've ever seen in your entire life. Until you've seen this pillow. Wow. Wow. These pillows, I'll tell you what these are. These are conversation starters. Can you say that about any other pillow?
And they're not just conversation starters. They can also be sources of deep security for you. If you have these on your bed, knowing while you sleep, you're surrounded by the symbols of security. Just imagine how safe you'll feel. And for that matter,
not just that, not just sleep with the pillows, but the blanket.
Yes. You could be sort of like the Linus of monarchists, clutching this thing for security's sake. Mm. Gosh, I'm ready for a nap.
Yeah, it's very soft fleece blanket. It's really wonderful.
Oh, that really is nice. Oh my, oh man. I'd be in favor of canceling the broadcast right now and take a little quick one. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, don't be a stranger. Certainly pick these up. They're really very nice, actually.
Yeah, very nice. Also, so you can do this through the Teespring website, and that, unlike Tumblr House website, they accept international orders. So you international monarchists or anybody who wants these internationally can get them. Teespring website. We have different sizes of pillows. We have additional things too. We have great phone coverings. Is really cool. We resized the banners so that they fit a phone covering pretty cool. So you can isn't that awesome? Where you can just have your phone out, because everyone always has their phone out, and then again it's a conversation starter. Whoa, what do you got on the back of your phone? Oh yeah, that's the Sacre-Cœur.
You don't know that? The double eagle.
What's the matter with you? You don't know what the Sacre-Cœur is? What kind of heathen are you?
See, it's a way of evangelizing through snobbery.
Yeah, that's what Belloc said.
Yes, it sure is. Sure is.
Okay, so we got hopefully we'll have the link in the description, or maybe I'll put it up on the top right corner. Okay, let's get to the questions.
All right.
This episode is jam-packed with questions on monarchy.
That's awfully eccentric.
Yeah, well,
Who wants to hear about monarchy? Monarchy's dead.
Monarchists want to hear about monarchy.
Yeah, but republics are the wave of the future. You know, like Angola,
well,
Mozambique, China, Cuba, Vietnam.
That's true. People's Republic of China.
See, you're not kidding. You know, it's. I mean, Adolf Hitler was elected. I'm telling you,
that's true.
It's a wave of the future, kids. Monarchy is one with the past and deserves to stay there. At least if you think that, you're eccentric.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see what else we got.
So you monarchists out there, you're in for quite a treat. It would be much appreciated if you liked and shared this video. Show your support.
You bet. Subscribe.
All right,
what do we got?
Let's go. First question is from Luke.
Okay, Luke.
I am told that the War of the Roses disproves monarchy. Apparently, only democracy can guarantee a peaceful transition of power. Would you be kind enough to give us a brief historical sketch of the War of the Roses? Does the War of the Roses prove that monarchy is unstable? So what happened, Charles?
Firstly,
you seem unimpressed.
I have to ask a question in return. As you know, the American Civil War was the bloodiest war this country ever fought. More Americans died in the Civil War than in all the other wars this country has fought ever since and before. From the Revolution to the Gulf.
What about the War of the Roses compared to the War of the Roses?
A lot bloodier. Now, here's the question. Doesn't that disprove the idea that democracies / republics are stable? And for that matter, what if I look at Africa and Latin America? Latin America, where since independence, having coup d'etat is about the only thing they know how to do, if I were to adopt this kind of questioning. And as for Africa, doubly so. So I would have to say, given the histories of the majority of republics, and again, the Weimar Republic in Germany, the never-ending sequence of governments in Italy, I would have to say on that basis that republics are far more unstable, if you're going to make a blanket statement like that.
That's true. I mean, it's easy to find the exception to the rule here.
Now, the War of the Roses was an exceptional thing. Because basically what happened was the main line of the House of Plantagenet died out. So the question was, who had the better claim to the throne? The House of Lancaster or the House of York? Or, Lancaster being represented by the Red Rose, York by the White. They called it the War of the Roses. Now, was this a horrible, terrible, bloody civil war? Oh yeah. It came to an end, actually, on today's day, today not being Monday, but the previous Thursday, 22nd of August, 1483, at Bosworth Field, when Richard III was killed in action and replaced by Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII. You notice what's on my lapel pin?
Yeah, the white rose.
White Rose of York. Usually I use it for the Jacobites, but I thought today I'd give it for Richard III, whose recent reburial, by the way, a couple of years ago, you remember, started all kinds of excitement.
Yeah, he was just lying around somewhere.
Well, he was under a car park, because the monastery that he had been entombed in was not down after the suppression of the monasteries by Henry VIII. They didn't take his body out, so there he was.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring thing. We talked about that on a previous episode, where over there they just got kings laying around everywhere.
No, but the Ricardians, which is what they call people who support him, the Ricardians are a fairly big group, the Richard III Society, who attempt to, shall we say, cast his life in a better light. You got to remember that what we think we know about Richard III and the rest of it comes from Shakespeare, who was probably a crypto-Catholic, but was not always a great historian. So, for instance, the Lancastrian, who was overthrown by Richard III's brother, was Henry VI. And Henry VI was quite possibly a saint.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Richard III apparently thought he was a saint. Why? Because he dug his body up from wherever it was and had it put in the King's Chapel at Windsor.
Mm.
And it became immediately a site of pilgrimage, which he allowed. And to make things even more confusing, while Henry VI was king, guess who his armies were fighting in France?
Who?
St. Joan of Arc.
Hmm.
So you see, these things are all
Yeah.
very weird. But to answer your question about stability in monarchies and the War of the Roses, War of the Roses is very much the exception that proves the rule. It was considered with such horror precisely because it was so different from everything that had happened. There had been a civil war perhaps 200 years before between the Empress Matilda and her nephew. But civil wars have been relatively rare in monarchical history and very common in Republican history.
Hmm.
So.
Okay. So that's it. That's your sketch of the war.
Well, basically, in the War of the Roses, you had the Yorkists overthrown initially by Lancaster in the person of Henry IV. Henry V became king. He was the king of Agincourt. You know, St. Crispin's Day, Kenneth Branagh, and all that stuff.
Hmm.
He died and was replaced with his infant son, Henry VI, whose reign was long and upsetting, and the Yorkists disputed his claim to the throne, and he was overthrown not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Wow.
And then got it back. So it was a real mess. And then finally, he died, and Edward became king, Edward IV. And when he died, his brother Richard III became king.
Did Richard III kill as many people as in the play? Did he really?
No, you'd have to go to the Richard III Society website to find that out, but they would say no.
Yeah, I was going to say, asking them.
Well, I mean, they come up with all sorts of proofs that at least convince them, anyway. And whether, I'd have to leave that to professionals to argue it out. I'm not...
You're not a professional historian.
No, well, have you ever been beaten to a pulp and left for dead? No, but I am not by any means an expert on the War of the Roses, and I am not the best person to evaluate the kinds of evidences they offer.
You weren't there.
Oh, well, not only was I not there, I have not studied it in sufficient detail.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Derek.
Okay.
I've enjoyed Charles's works on monarchism, and he is close to making me a monarchist himself.
Oh, boy.
However, one of my biggest hang-ups about monarchism is the very dubious nature in which it is treated in Holy Scripture. In 1 Kings chapter 8, God himself chastises the Hebrews for desiring a king, and tells them all the horrible things they will suffer at the hands of the kings. The next 3.5 books see these come to pass. It is hard to read the above passage and the rest of the books of Kings without thinking that God himself is opposed to monarchy. How does Charles reconcile this very equivocal position given to monarchs in the Bible? More importantly, how was the church reconciled? How has the church reconciled this passage from 1 Kings 8 with her long preference for monarchy?
Well, firstly, you've got to bear in mind that the argument from Scripture about the king of the God didn't want kings in Israel was actually first adumbrated. There's a word for it.
What?
Adumbrated.
Adumbrated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Adumbrated. It was first adumbrated, expressed, in other words,
Oh.
by none other than Thomas Paine.
Wow.
And Paine himself declared that it was funny he could get so many people to believe it, given that he himself didn't believe in the Old Testament. So I just thought I'd put that out
Okay.
there. Well, you want to know where your sources are. You got to bear in mind that the children of Israel were unlike any other on earth, firstly. They were the only ones who had retained the original revelation and the original covenant of all the peoples of the earth.
Yeah.
So God wanted to rule them directly, and this was to be done through the judges. But as we know, not every judge was Samuel. Some judges were corrupt, like the ones who dealt with Susanna. We live in a country and a time and a place that is ruled by judges. And
The way God wanted. In the Bible.
Which God?
I thought you said that God wanted the Israelites ruled by judges.
But we're not Israelites. And our judges are more like Susanna's than Samuel. You see what's happened. Rule by judges for us has turned this country into a pit, a bubbling sewer of grossness.
We just need good judges.
What's that?
We just need good judges.
Who's going to get them?
We gonna get them.
Yeah. Okay. That's an eccentric view, but you hold on to it. The truth of the matter is that just as the children of Israel gave up the temple and became the church, so too Catholic monarchy was actually born at the Last Supper. Remember that for all of his comments about the children of Israel wanting kings, there were holy kings, by the way, like Hezekiah, who profited from their holiness. He nevertheless insisted in coming to earth as the son of the house of David and as heir of the Davidic kingdom.
That's true.
Yep. Well, here's the funny thing. At the Last Supper, what happens? He demonstrates the soul of Catholic kingship through washing the feet of his brethren. And it's interesting that in the Latin Catholic countries, until they tend to lose power, Catholic monarchs wash the feet of poor people on Maundy Thursday.
Wow.
It was a big ceremony. And Catholic monarchy, therefore, was quite a different thing from the other monarchies with which the Israelites were familiar. Persia and Babylon and so forth. Beverly Hills, all that.
Beverly Hills?
Yeah, pagan monarchy.
Who's the king of Beverly Hills?
It changes from year to year. Ask me after the next Academy Awards, and I'll tell you.
Ah.
But, seriously, you read St. Thomas and de Regno and all that. You read the coronation rites of kings that the church put out.
Could you repeat that? Read St. Thomas Aquinas de
Regno.
Yeah.
You read the coronation rites of kings that various church bodies put out. And it becomes very, very clear what the Catholic view of kingship was. And it was quite different to the pagan view of kingship. It was quite different to the modern view of governance.
So you're saying St. Thomas Aquinas was in favor of monarchy, and he wrote this work to show that monarchy is the best.
As advice to the king of Cyprus as to how to rule.
Oh.
And the thing is, there's a lot of argument over what's called the divine right of kings. But even St. Robert Bellarmine, who was a strenuous opponent of the Protestant version of that, was not anti-monarchist. He was simply anti-abuse of it.
Because you have to get rid of tyrants. I think that's been leveraged as support of the United States. We're getting rid of a tyrant.
Well...
Right? And no, I'm just saying other people have done
that's what they say. The problem with it, of course, is that, number one, it's not true as far as George III was concerned. There was no tyrant. And secondly, if you were to apply that teaching today to this country, with our gay marriage and our infanticide and everything else we do, well, then you'd have to lead a revolution. I'll follow you.
Not me.
No, you draw that sword. There will be no tyrannical, absolute, infant murdering, marriage destroying tyrants over us. Oh, I guess not. No. We'll be good. It's not like they were those evil old monarchs. We elect them. And you know what? If that's true, it makes us equally guilty.
You know, I never thought of that before, the concept of tyranny back in the day compared to
Tyranny
what
now.
we have now.
Do you really think even Henry VIII could have gotten away with gay marriage or infanticide?
Yeah, that seems like
As it was, he had to deal with rebellions against what he did at the church. Imagine that he attacked reality itself. Think of what his people would have done to him.
Yeah, they would have probably killed him.
Yep. But we're better people than that. We're so sweet and wonderful.
Well, we're more enlightened.
Well, we're more light than the loafers, maybe.
More light on the loafers?
More light than the loafers. You never heard that phrase?
That's homophobic.
No, it's not. It's just descriptive.
Okay, well, what does that mean then?
Light than the loafers means you walk kind of in a light manner.
Why is that?
Because you're like the loafers. It's a description. Look, if I say you've got brown eyes, right? What good is it? Why is that? Genes? I don't know. You got brown eyes, that's all.
No, that's not... Well, what if I say you're very blonde?
Well,
there's something attached to
I'd
that.
say what happened to your eyesight? No, I'm platinum blonde, I guess.
All right, well, I'll let you off the hook, Charles.
You better. Otherwise, it's back to Barney, what's his face? Even I've forgotten the poor man. It's so sad. I feel very badly for him and his family. What's the next question?
Next question is from Michael.
Hello, Michael.
One of the most vehement criticisms that I've found against monarchy, especially from the modern liberal perspective, is the problem of inbreeding. Some examples commonly given are defects like the Habsburg jaw and their history of mental illness, deemed hardly conducive for ruling an empire. What is your response to these types of criticisms in defense of Catholic monarchies or monarchy in general? Are there any misconceptions about breeding practices in royal families that folks making these critiques are ignoring or over-exaggerating, in your opinion?
Well, yes, there are several. Firstly, as innumerable Republican leaders from Hitler to Woodrow Wilson show us, you don't need to be inbred to be insane. You don't, believe me. So far as I know, Bill Clinton's parents weren't related, and he managed to be pretty awful. When you look at the question of inbreeding, everyone points at the exceptions that supposedly prove the rule, like poor Charles III of Spain, who really had issues. There's no doubt about that. And yet, even he managed to appoint fairly decent people to run the country. Because, again, with kings, they are invested in the country in a way that presidents simply aren't. Why? It's the family business, at worst, and something given them by God at best. You look at someone like the Emperor Charles of Austria, Nicholas II, Louis XVI, Charles I, a lot of other kings, considered that dying for their peoples was part of the job. Now, other than Washington, maybe Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln, can you really think of any American president who would really be prepared to die for his people?
Yeah, I know you've said this historically. I believe you've said the monarchy has always gone downhill when kings were no longer willing to die for their people.
Yeah, very, very true. Because what makes, at the end of the day, what makes monarchy different from a republic is that the monarch believes that his subjects have been given him by God, and that he is to be their father, and to attempt to love them as a father would love his children. And that means being willing to die for them.
Okay, let me do some devil's advocate, because I know people are out there thinking this. That's idealistic. You're just LARPing. That's not a realistic expectation that they should be so Christ-like.
Yeah, except it's happened. I go back. Charles I, Louis XVI, Nicholas II, Charles of Austria.
But that was another time.
100 years ago. All right, King Kigeli V of Rwanda. I knew him. Haile Selassie in Ethiopia.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Truth is an unfortunate thing when it gets in the way of what we're supposed to believe. Especially as Americans, because then it carries with it the possibility of being un-American. No, I mean, as you know, the presidency is simply a monarchy rented out 4 years at a time to the highest bidder. And of course, you know, do you take better care of the house that you own or the house that you rent? Especially when you know you're going to be there for 4 years. I've lived in the place I've rented for literally 32 years.
Okay.
So I would have taken better care of it than if I'd only had it for 4 or 8.
I see. Okay, so
basically, a president's like a rent-a-king, and has the same relationship to a king that a rent-a-cop has to a cop. Now, who would you prefer defending you? A policeman or the gas station security guard?
Well, the thing personally for me, the most appealing thing and the biggest advantage of a king over president, at least as you've stated, is that a king is supposed to be above politics.
Yeah.
You know, he's supposed to make sure that everyone is supposed to get along.
And that the system continues to function of its own. Whereas by his very nature, the president is not just a rent-a-king, he's also the creature of his party. And so he can only really be the ruler of those who elected him.
Yeah.
Which means that every 4 years there'll be at least 52% disaffected. Not 52, 48%.
Yeah, so it seems like so much there's a wave of popularity back and forth. You know, everybody's so sick of one side because it's done so bad that they go the other side. Then they're sick of that side, they go the other side. And each side, so much of it seems to be about undoing what their predecessor did. And to me, that's not progressive.
No, well,
that's
I mean,
just
as opposed to doing anything real.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, elected people are incapable of setting long-term policy, and what they do is more affected by either getting themselves or their party reelected than it is about the inherent value of a given measure.
And again, what the book we promoted, The End of Democracy, this is one of the structural problems where Christoph points out no one actually needs to be financially responsible in a democracy. You want as many people you want to say yes to as many people as possible. You want to spend as much as possible, and leave the bill to your successor.
Yep.
And our history of that, I mean, that's why we have this giant deficit, and it's going to continue. There's no reason. There's no incentive. It makes no sense for anyone to actually be fiscally conservative in a democracy.
Well, especially you bear in mind that in a certain sense we're all bought off. I mean,
right, exactly.
Who's going to vote for? Let's say you had a president. Don't ask me how this happened.
Yeah.
But you managed to get a presidential candidate from one of the two major parties.
Yeah.
Who says, "All right, gang, look, we can't go on this way. We have to radically retrench. First thing we can do is start limiting pensions."
Yeah.
The second thing is that because many of our problems come from our birth decline, we're going to make contraception rather more difficult and give financial rewards to those who bear children.
Yeah.
Who's going to back that up in our wonderful society? I mean, just stop and think for a second. One of the most wonderful things you could possibly do is outlaw divorce.
Yeah.
If only because people would go into marriage a lot more carefully than they do. Who's going to do that?
Right. So, Oh, gosh, yeah, this just got my mind thinking about End of Democracy. We need more people buying that book because there are just problems that we need to address. The other point, I always like to make a joke of it. You never have anyone rioting or picketing or over fiscal conservatism.
No.
Like you need to get things in order. You need to get your house in order, and you need to do things right, or otherwise I'm I'm going to shut this place down. You don't have that.
No. Well, no, because again, I mean, what are they, pensions?
Yeah, exactly. Like, where are you going to cut? Now you cut the pensions, then they're gonna march. Anything you cut,
any entitlement,
yeah,
people will march. I'm still looking forward to the million drunk stagger on Washington. For our people.
Yeah.
The Alco-Americans.
Alco-Americans, yeah.
Well, I mean, look, they've established for homosexuality quasi-ethnic status on the basis of behavior.
Right.
So why not for drunks?
That's true.
If you look at us as a minority, we are the only minority in the history of this country whose very existence was made a crime by an amendment to the Constitution.
Wow.
See? We're people with a past or people with a story to tell. Yeah. Uh-huh. And one day, we're going to be free. One day there'll be, just as there are now all sorts of sex ed things, there'll be alcohol awareness programs in schools to allow children to choose themselves what and how much they want to drink. We'll lower the drinking age to 16. And people like me will be legally able to handle heavy equipment and high explosives. Yeah.
That's very important to you, huh?
Well, it is. And why can't I drive drunk? Exactly. You don't have an answer to that one, do you?
Well, because you're going to kill somebody.
Yeah. What about AIDS? Exactly. So, well, for that matter, what about lung cancer?
Well, aren't we taking steps to that in California? Heavily taxing smoking cigarettes?
No, yeah, but while we're doing that, we're encouraging pot, which is more carcinogenic.
But there's less puff.
It causes more cancer.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, you can smoke a pack a day. I don't think people who are getting high off weed are smoking the equivalent of a pack a day in terms of inhaling.
I don't think you've ever known a lot of potheads.
Whatever, Charles.
And there's another minority that should be protected.
What, potheads?
Oh, of course, why not? Drunks, potheads, embezzlers.
Embezzlers?
Yeah, the embezzler American community.
We're approaching territory, I think it's the Babylon Bee, where...
What? I'm just saying.
It reminds me of the article, Felony Home Invaders. You know, where in the Bible has it said that you can't commit felony home invasion? It should be a right.
Listen to him, ladies and gentlemen. The man's onto something. That is brilliant. Sign me up.
Where does it say? It doesn't say that anywhere.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. Where in the Bible does it say you can't commit voter fraud? No, it's true. There's nothing in the Bible against, threatening people on the internet.
Right.
Yeah. So there, ladies and gentlemen. I hope we've got that clear.
We've got it. We've covered this. So we've covered this question and much, much more. All right, on to the next one.
All right.
Next question is from Joseph.
Joseph.
Mr. Coulombe.
Yes, sir.
Is it true that before the Italian unification, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies was one of the most prosperous nations in Europe?
Yes.
If so, what caused its downfall?
Well, a couple of things. You've got to bear in mind that before the Risorgimento, the Prime Minister of Sardinia, Count Cavour, knew very, very, very well what he wanted to do in terms of uniting the peninsula. So he did two things with Sardinia that nobody else did. One, he put in really confiscatory taxation. So the Sardinian government would have a lot more money to play with than the other governments on the peninsula. And then he introduced conscription. So they'd have a bigger army than anybody else. And those two things are what allowed them, with on-again, off-again French and on-again, off-again British help, to conquer the entire peninsula. Now, here's the thing. When the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies was conquered by Garibaldi, it fell relatively quickly. What they don't tell you is about the guerrilla war that went on for years afterwards. Guerrilla
Yeah.
war. The so-called brigandage, the brigandage. They fought for King Francesco for years afterwards. Plus, here's the basic point, the bottom line. Prior to 1860, there was virtually no immigration from Italy. After 1870, when the Risorgimento was completed, there was literally millions of Italians left Italy for anywhere. United States, Canada, Gallimbardo.
Yeah.
Gotta mention Gallimbardo.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Mexico. Italians went all over the place, anywhere to get away from the new government.
Yeah.
So, if the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies had been backward and stupid and, everything the morons like to yap, where was the pre-war immigration?
That's true.
Oh, yeah. I forgot there wasn't any.
I love when you bring up historical questions like this. This reminds me of, sorry for the tangent, but this reminds me of the brilliant answer to St. Patrick, where modern scholars said that him driving snakes out was a metaphor for him driving pagans out. And you asked, well, where are the pagan towns? Where'd they go? Where'd they go?
We know where the snakes went. They came to the United States and
Yeah.
became politicians and judges.
Yeah, United Snakes of America.
That's how we got our name.
Yeah.
But where did the pagans go?
Yeah.
Where are the mass migrations of Irish pagans?
So I love these very, very simple historical questions that modern scholars don't seem to ask.
Well,
What is...
it means you're not meeting with his approval.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry.
He's not taking it. He's not taking your sorry. He's pouting. Historians can pout,
Yeah.
especially when they're Marxist historians who don't really know a lot. They get very upset.
I'm sure.
You give them anything off the menu, and they get really little hands wave. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, people have commented. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Our last monarchist question for today.
Oy.
From Thomas.
Thomas, this is for you.
Dear Mr. Coulombe, I was wondering which countries do you think will be the first to bring back their monarchies? Do you think Russia and Poland will be the first ones, or do you think it will start in the Western European countries like France or Italy? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
I really have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of the Balkan countries, because in many ways, various of their rightful kings are this close, sitting in the royal palace and doing things that kings would do. I've had French royalists tell me, it began here, it has to end here.
Of course.
One hears whispers that Putin would like to replace himself when he steps down with the Romanovs. And, of course, there's a lot of pro-Habsburg feeling in Central Europe that is connected to the slow coming together of those countries. But I have no idea.
Well, let me ask you
Maybe
this.
Brazil.
We've kind of touched on this before. I'm not so interested in restoring monarchies as I am restoring Catholicism.
The two are intricately linked.
Because, so I guess it's a chicken or the egg kind of question here. If you restore a monarchy in a godless society, does that monarchy become godless? Or is it top-down influence, or is it bottom-up influence?
They would have to do it top-down, which would be very difficult. Although, I mean, obviously, society always, when it's going downhill, society always rots from the top down like fish. Repairing it is a tougher job from the top down. And the reason is that reforming the manners of people, which is what you have to do. And we talked earlier about, getting people to have children and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, getting them into the proper frame of mood is very hard to do from the top down. It can be done, but it's better if there's some sort of a revival of faith among themselves.
Right, well, I'm going to jump this in since I'm going to start talking about this. Book of the day, Star-Spangled Crown, book by Charles. Now, in Star-Spangled Crown, see, So a Catholic king comes in, and it's a top down, and it seemed pretty easy. Like 50% of the population became Catholic, and what you cited was people tend to become the religion of their bosses.
That's true.
Is that really realistic, though?
Well, it all not that realistic. It might happen that way. It has happened that way. It's more common that they take the religion of their bosses and their bosses are scum. Well, no, it's true, because, I mean, you look, for instance, at Austria-Hungary prior to 1918. Now, there was no doubt about the Catholic nature of both the Habsburgs and of their monarchy. Absolutely no doubt. But Protestants, Eastern Orthodox, and Jews had a pretty decent position in society. Admiral Horthy, for instance, the last commander of the Imperial Navy, was a Calvinist.
Yeah.
They had Jewish generals in the army, and you know the great joke was that the Jews of Austria-Hungary, if they were socialists or communists, they hated the Habsburgs. If they were anything else,
yeah,
from Orthodox wearing the funny clothing to intellectual music lovers,
yeah,
they loved the Habsburgs. So you had that dichotomy. But that state of affairs came about over a long period of time. It would be a very difficult thing to simply order it so.
Okay.
But, as you rightly allude to it, in Star-Spangled Crown, I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. I find the events of Star-Spangled Crown, and I wrote it, so I know what I'm talking about, although interesting. The way I wrote them, it would be highly unlikely.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my point in writing the book. I wasn't writing a blueprint for the future.
Yeah.
So much as I was, on the one hand, trying to stimulate thought about monarchy in general, here or anywhere else, and on the other hand, to try to get my readers to begin to think of America as a thing in itself rather than an ideology. Because, see, you've got to remember that most of us who are Americans conflate our country with the idea of Americanism. And on that basis, we call things un-American. And we don't simply mean they're foreign, we mean they're bad.
Of course.
Well, that has nothing to do with the country as it is, and everything to do with the ideology that we conceive to have created the country. Well, the problem with that is that ideology is dying. And so, where does that leave the country itself? Where does that leave patriotism? Now, I've actually had people say to me that, if the United States is not the shining city on the hill, the last great hope of mankind, the blah, blah, the blah, 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 then it's not worth anything. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second. It's got a screwy history, but not all screwy. We've produced some great things in this country. It's the country your ancestors and mine came to, and did rather well, I may say.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that you cite. One of the greatest legacies of America is people from every country came here and did well, where no other country can say that.
Well, others can, but not on the same scale.
Yeah, not on the same, excuse me.
You've got Australia and Canada and Argentina and all. They can all say the same thing, and they'd be right, but not on the same scale.
Yeah.
And we are so, in some ways, so completely the creation of that immigration. Again, not entirely, and as you know, it's the not entirely, the colonial roots that the king in the book uses partly to create a monarchy. Because the point I make in the book is that it's not a restoration, because as such there is no American monarchy. There's nothing to restore. There are a lot of bits and pieces that are lying around. So what he does is he has what I call in the book the instauration, and then he picks up all the bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Because, due to our colonial history, we're the heir to at least 3 different monarchical traditions, British, French, and Spanish. And then, of course, the immigrants have all brought their own. So, as you may recall, he even makes himself, and again, this is kind of borrowed from the Austrian practice, but he makes himself the patron of the Islamic mosques that were founded by foreign Muslim kings. Even though he's very much a Catholic himself, but that was how the Emperor of Austria managed it. he was the head. This was the Catholic King of Bavaria, the Catholic King of Saxony. In addition to being the top layman in his country, he was the head of the established Protestant church.
Yeah.
Just like James II of England. He was Catholic, but he was the head of the Church of England. Because that, of course, it's that kind of thing that a Catholic in that position has to somehow struggle with. But, the popes okayed it. So it was okay for them, especially bearing in mind that these were not what you would call very loosey-goosey people. Obviously there are no perfect solutions to anything. And what I hope to do with Star-Spangled Crown was to get my readers to examine these things in a new light.
Feel feelings they've never, or what dreams that they've never dreamt before.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm not saying that the what I propose in the book, and I do deal with a lot of different elements of American life. I don't say that the suggestions I make are really what needs to be done or the best thing that could be done, or we'll all go to hell if they aren't done. But what I did hope to do was stimulate thought and dialogue. I realize these are two practices we try to get away from. Because everybody knows everything already.
Right.
So all you need to do is condemn anyone who differs from yourself. But let's pretend for a second that one doesn't know everything. My hope was, as I say, to stimulate intelligent conversation and thinking about these things. One of the things that my mythical king did was the question of the flag.
Right. Yeah.
And instead of abolishing it or changing it, he subsumes it, and he makes disrespect to the flag tantamount to lèse-majesté. Now, in real monarchies, no flags aren't like that.
Okay.
But our new king comes to a situation that's already existent, where the flag is sacred.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to get rid of it or change it, he adds it, as it were, to the royal mystique. But in so doing, he also does something for the royal mystique.
Right. So, yeah.
He literally wraps himself in the flag.
Yeah.
Which, we always talk about politicians doing that.
It's a smart move.
Yeah. Well, and, I had a lot of fun. There are a lot of jokes in the book.
Yeah.
They're not everyone will catch them, or all of them. But I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could tell.
I did like referring to Ethel Merman's, I think, 1949 musical, Call Me Madam, as the biopic of President Truman's ambassadors to Lichtenberg.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
My favorite is, I forgot the Spanish name. It's like Cazadores del Rey or something, but the Hunters of the King.
Yeah, the Cazadores del Rey.
And...
yeah, they started out as gangbangers.
Yeah, they were gangbangers who basically turned into, like, the equivalent of, like, the Swiss Guard or something, or something like that. And I remember you said the only way you can tell of their origin was they got gang tats on their knuckles. Otherwise, you would never know. Now, and I want to ask you about that. What did you draw from to get that?
Lots of different histories.
Where you basically have gangbanger equivalents
thugs.
That just thugs and totally reform in that manner.
Well, they become the special guard of the king, and all of a sudden, now mind you, it was perhaps a little precipitate the way I handled it, but things like that have happened.
Yeah.
And in truth, all of the historic elements of the book, quotation marks, up until all of the history you see in there up until 2016 is absolutely correct. But the history of the monarchy itself and the different things that happened, obviously I made all that up, but they were all drawn from real-world parallels.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the scene where you may remember the youngest son of the king is killed fighting in Liberia.
Yeah, very emotional.
Yeah, it's very emotional, but it's based not solely, but to a great degree, on the death of the Duke of Kent in World War II.
Yeah, it seems like there you really wanted to highlight the emotion and the personal relationship that a monarchy has to the people compared to perhaps our current system.
Yeah, and of course, in doing that, you know, my mythical, my fictional author, who is my as yet unborn great nephew, he, I had a lot of fun both with his character and constructing him, because I had to do that for him to write the book.
Yeah.
But also, he explained the great paradox, which is that on the one hand, he was trying to give an impersonal description of the way the monarchy works, but by the same token, monarchy being an extremely personal form of government, it would be a distortion not to introduce that personal element. So, but while all that section is fictional, it's drawn from real-world parallels.
Right. Okay, so well, let's touch on, again, the question of restoration, because I think that's one of the difficult parts. In the book, in the beginning, honestly, it's not a serious part like the restoration part. It's because it's one of the most difficult, I think, questions of the monarchists, like how would a restoration happen? And so you kind of, is it fair to say you dodge it a little bit? I
dodge it completely.
You dodge it completely.
I needed the Republic to end, so guess what happened? And then I needed to put in a monarchy, so a monarchy was put in. That's how that worked.
There you go. Okay, good.
See, I had to get from here to here, right?
Right.
Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I did was I went from here to here.
Okay.
Well, I had to get there somehow.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that clear that this isn't like some blueprint.
No,
and you've already made that clear.
Not at all.
So
it's but again, for the thing to make some kind of sense, I had to get and see the third thing too. There were those two questions. One that actually Christoph, the author of The End of Democracy, tossed at me, which is that there's not a unified body of European Catholic monarchical thought, for the simple reason it's also nationally based. And so I wanted to look at the concept, as I say, apart from national considerations, that is to say, European national considerations. The second point, as I've said, was the idea of trying to create an American patriotism that's not dependent on waving the flag or, you know, we're number one or whatever. But what I was faced with was, okay, that's nice, but why? Why would anyone bother reading a treatise like that from me?
Mm-hmm.
And then it occurred to me, I know what I'll do. I'll make it a work of fiction. And I'll hang all this stuff on a future America that doesn't exist. And that way I can look at the thing more easily. And I hope, and entertain a little bit as well, which I did. Of course, you know, our author has not really had as brilliant a career as he thinks he had. You know, I think you get that reading through the lines.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, he is so grateful to be getting, at the end of his life, he's in his 90s, he's getting the very lowest award the king could give out. And he's very excited.
He's very peculiar.
Yeah, he is very peculiar.
He's got an interesting view of history. It's funny how he views, you know, past events that we already know, in a different light.
Well, as we do. He filters them through his own lenses, because we do that.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's a lens that is foreign to us.
Right.
It's this different.
It's different to us, but ours is as far into reality as his are.
Right.
That was my point.
That's your point, yeah.
I mean, he sees things, and of course, I made it, I hope, I mean, he sees things through the monarchy as an accomplished fact that doesn't need defending.
Yeah.
You notice he doesn't really defend anything.
That's true.
Because just the way we don't. We're obviously perfect.
That's true.
And that's the way he views things through his lenses.
That's interesting. I never thought of that. Wow. Gosh.
Well, that's the thing.
Very true.
That's the thing. He's as smug as we are. He really is.
He is. Wow.
He's very smug.
Gosh.
And he's convinced that everything they're doing is far better than was ever done before, just like us. He's looking at us the way we look at other people, the way we look at the past.
Wow, that's a great dissection.
Well, I don't mind saying it was on my mind while I was writing it,
Yeah.
But that's, as I say, I had to construct the character. It was a bit like acting in the sense that when I would sit down to write that,
Yeah.
I would put myself in his shoes, you know.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, he is an academic, and you know how smug they get to be.
Of course.
He's very self-assured. He's been on a very low level a beneficiary of the new system. He could just remember, you know, when he was 10 when it happened, the collapse of the Republic.
Yeah.
And as he says, you know, what I remember most about that winter is the cold and the fear. And of course, in real life, that's how things are.
Yeah.
And where does this come from? It comes from listening to people reminisce about the Depression and FDR.
Mm.
That's where it came from.
Interesting.
This is what I mean by historical parallels.
Yeah.
Because, you know, in a sense, bear in mind that human beings are limited creatures and we have a limited number of reactions to anything. They seem infinite, but they're not. So he, to the best of my ability, I created a character who reacted, I hope, in a realistic way to the events he lived through. So for him and for people like him, the monarchy was like the New Deal and Roosevelt to people, to real believers.
Right.
Happy days are here again.
Yeah.
And where just months before there was fear and hardship and death, all of a sudden this fellow comes in who says, all right, we're going to do things differently now. And that happens in history.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a king.
Okay.
And sometimes it's not. And sometimes the person who claims this is benevolent, and sometimes he's not. Fortunately, for all concerned, in this particular case, the king is a benevolent figure. And, you know, even designing his character, which I had to do on a secondary level, because bear in mind, we never get into the king's thoughts.
Right.
We don't really know what motivates him. All we know is what my mythical son or great-nephew sees. And he sees him the way your grandmother might have seen FDR, which means it may or may not be accurate.
Yeah.
And if you apply kind of a critical sense to that section of the book, I think you can see that he's not always aware, that is the writer. Oh, hello. This is from our city comptroller here in Los Angeles. He gave a lecture at the Breakfast Club yesterday.
Very good.
But he's not always aware of things that I hope the reader will be aware of about him.
Yeah.
His career isn't nearly as brilliant as he thinks it was.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so buy Star-Spangled Crown, TumblrHouse.com. About $14, I think. $13, $14. Signed. All of Charles's books signed. That's why you should buy from TumblrHouse.com.
For the moment.
For the moment.
I'm going home.
But I'm not done with this this restoration question because it's so interesting. Because it's a big.
Well, it's a question. Don't forget, and this is another point I want to make. Even though I'm eccentric, anyone who has any idea that's different from what we have now, the caprocracy under which we labor. If you've got any other view that you think is correct, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're a libertarian. I don't care if you're a constitutionalist. I don't care if you're a federalist, a distributist, a neo-Confederate. I don't care what you are. If you think there's a better way than what we have, the same horrible question faces you that faces a monarchist. That's nice, pork chop. How are you going to get from here to there?
Right.
And unfortunately, that's a question which will silence most of us.
I don't really trouble myself with that because with the one you said a quote that really resounded within me from I think a 19th century German figure perhaps. He said, "We'll have a king when we are a kingly people."
Actually, it was the other way around.
Oh, real? What was it?
He said, Germany ceased to have kings when the Germans ceased to be a kingly people.
Oh.
It's a negative.
Oh, wow.
It's not helpful.
Oh, wow.
Because how do you stop being scumbags?
Interesting.
How do you do that?
Oh, man, that totally...
Yeah, it's just the reverse.
That ruined my inspiration, Charles.
Sorry.
No, so it doesn't apply.
Okay, it does apply. Anything to keep you from bursting into tears and running off the set.
Gosh, okay. Darn.
I'm sorry.
Okay, but, you know, the thing about the restoration, again, the other thing is, I mean, with a change of power, it seems like a lot of people would have to die.
Oh, yeah. I mean, nothing...
And so, like, I don't even want to go there.
Well, no. No. You see, this is why, and people don't realize this, this is why the church has always taught that no revolution and no war is legitimate unless staying where you are would be far worse. In other words, whatever you want to achieve has to be worth the deaths and the disruption.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
It has to be worse to stay as we are than to risk all the deaths.
Yeah.
So that's got to be pretty bad.
That's got to be like, yeah.
That's got to be bloody miserable.
Yeah.
This is why I say the American Revolution does not fit. Because people weren't miserable by and large. There was, they were enslaving us. Horse manure. And the same with the French Revolution. The same with just about any revolution you can think of. The deaths that resulted from it, and that a little bit of intelligence would make obvious would have to result from it.
Yeah.
The neighbor against neighbor, the tarring and feathering, the seizures of property, the disruption of social intercourse.
Yeah.
All that stuff was not worth it.
Yeah.
And it almost never is. Now, on rare occasions it is. But
what are you thinking of when you say that?
I can't think of anything at the moment.
Well, then how do you know?
But I'm sure I could come up with something. No, I mean, if there had been, for instance, a revolution against the Soviet Union, Stauffenberg versus Hitler, you know, then, but those are very rare.
Okay.
Interestingly, they all happened in the 20th century, but never mind. I wonder why they call the 20th the bloodiest of all centuries. They also call it the century of the common man. That's strange. Anyway, never mind. And the American century. See, the 20th has a lot to live up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the 21st century is the gay century. Can we not go there?
Yeah, let's not.
Let's just drop that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, so, yeah, I mean, this is the big question. How do you get from here to there? Now, the way I sidestepped it, in a sense, in Star-Spangled Crown, but actually, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I look back to the Great Depression, which produced the widest range of political alternatives in this country that one has ever seen. Obviously, only one of them was adopted, the New Deal. But it took that kind of disruption to have people think in other areas. So, in essence, the system under which we are living now must be perceived by the great majority to fail for something else to take its place. And that failure has to be a pretty basic failure, like the Soviet Union.
Yeah, because, see, one of the problems is when we vote on things and we decide on things, what most people unfortunately are saying is, okay, do I want this or do I don't want this? As opposed to, is this good or is this bad?
Exactly.
So the breaking point reaches when people no longer are satisfied in terms of getting what they want. And that's something completely different. That's like Soviet Union stuff.
And of course, the Soviet Union only collapsed because at the end of the day, it could no longer deliver the goods.
Right.
And so that is when you get room for change. The alternatives are very unpleasant.
Unfortunately, and I'm reminded of another quote because...
Well,
sorry.
Well, there is a third possibility, of course, and this touches on where we began. If there were a religious revolution in this country, then the institutions would change, as they did in Rome when Christianity triumphed. The pagan Roman Empire was by no means the same place as the Christian. So, but those things, you know, they came about. The conversions of various peoples came about because of pre-existing problems. You know, the old gods have failed us. Now what do we do? Well, okay, that's nice. How did they fail you? We had wars, we had famines, we had floods. Well, notice there's a price to that.
Yeah.
You ever have a war or a famine or a flood where nobody either died or was inconvenienced?
No.
No. It's just, oh, this is awful. This terrible war is going on. No one's died. And there's been no property damage, but it's really upsetting. Well, those things don't happen.
The Cold War.
Oh, there were hot wars in the midst of the Cold War. Don't you kid yourself. They were pretty terrible too, some of them. And we had I once hurt my knee through the Cold War. No, we did a drop and cover. I had to get under my desk, but I bumped my knee against the leg of the desk. I am a veteran of the Cold War. I was wounded in the Cold War, and I didn't get any Purple Heart.
Battle of Wounded Knee?
Yeah, my personal wounded knee. I do think Sister Mary Esther did anything for me. I said, Sister, I bumped my knee. She said, poor baby, get up. See, this is how a veteran of the Cold War was treated after his suffering his battle-connected injury.
Sad.
Yeah, I think so.
But one last thing. I know we've touched on this so long, but I can't help it because I'm reminded of something very poignant that you said in terms of, okay, what's the breaking point? What gets us to action? And like, how far are we from there, right? Like, how far are we from the breaking point? And I'm reminded of your quote because you think we're very far because you said, because you cite our obesity problem.
No.
Right? See, because
not that we have one.
You know, when everything is so bad that, you know, nutrition becomes an issue, then
that's when you've got problems.
That's when you got problems.
Until then, people will put up with a lot. I fear a couple of things. Firstly, the election of Mr. Trump well, bear in mind it was the product of 8 years of the country being pushed in a very specific direction.
Yes.
By our lords and masters. So the reaction on the part of a lot of people was to vote for Mr. Trump successfully, as it turned out. And so there he is, as sovereign of a little over half of the population, maybe more. Unless the economy tanks, I predict that he, like Criswell, that he will be elected in 2020, re-elected. But when his 8 years are up, it'll be back to the feeding frenzy. Now, if the Democrats manage to get one of the sorts of sideshow freaks they've been exhibiting as president, what you saw in the last couple of years under Obama will seem moderate. And what will the response to that be? Not too much unless and until the economy tanks. But under that kind of leadership, the economy has a much better chance of tanking. So you've got all the Antifa, for instance, in Portland. The police not doing anything about it. Imagine that there's hunger in addition, and Antifa acts up. Well, there's going to be a lot of dead Antifa, and not from the cops.
Yeah. You've been saying this for a while.
I have, and I believe it to be true. I believe that what our lords and masters don't understand is that the people that they're smacking around and kicking in the gut are not like them. They're not nice people. They're not Chardonnay sippers. And it takes a lot to get them upset and riled up. I mean, really upset. But if you finally manage to do it, they're not fun. I mean, I remember during one of the riots in Milwaukee, and you know, I hasten to answer that I do not view this in racial terms. This particular episode was a black riot, but it's rather more complex than mere race. But in this particular case, blacks rioting in Milwaukee. And you know, it was during that the black sheriff there in Milwaukee.
That's my favorite sheriff, Sheriff David Clark.
He declared that Obama had declared war on law enforcement.
Which he did.
Well, which he did, but imagine a future Obama on steroids as president.
Yeah.
And how will law enforcement react then?
Well, that's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things in my book, you may recall, where the police of a large city in the Northeast applauding and laughing.
Yeah, they let it burn.
And encouraged the rioters. What they let burn was the mayor's house.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that mayor was vaguely based upon the mayors of Baltimore, who encouraged the rioters. You would get that kind of payback.
Yeah, I remember because I knew cops, young cops at that time, and they were scared.
Oh, yeah.
They were really scared.
Yeah. And what you see, part of the problem that our lords and masters have, they don't realize that if you want to maintain power, you don't smack around the means of your maintaining power. The police and the military.
Yeah.
You don't do that. Well, unless you're stupid.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. So, the thing is then that under those circumstances, the rioters were burning their own neighborhoods. And I remember this one lady, a shop owner, a black lady on TV, she says, why don't you go after a white neighborhood? Well, the problem with them going after a white neighborhood in the suburbs of Milwaukee is that they're armed to the teeth. And they get shot dead. Similarly, when we had the rioting here in '92, and the Beverly Hills PD had the kill them if they cross the line order. And they did. The mob crosses the line, pop, 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 and suddenly there's no more rioting at Beverly Hills. That is what our lords and masters forget.
Yeah.
Now, I've quoted it many times this past year. I'm going to quote it again. There's the hard rains are going to fall. Old civil rights song. And I, for one, am very unhappy about it. I love this country, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to see what's become of the Scouts. I hate to see what's become of fraternities that they've declared war on. That's all over the country. Frats are being attacked because they're male only. Ooh, what about sororities, moron? Yeah, different. Well, you know what? I love the America I was born into. It's the land of white male privilege. It was a land of white male privilege that provided opportunities for everybody if they wanted them, and a very basic place of support if they didn't. When you go to some of the other hellholes in this world of ours, trust me, you could do a lot better than white male domination. The good news, however, is that I can't think of any.
The good news is you're gonna jump off like rats on a rat on a sinking ship, and you're gonna become an expatriate in Austria and form your own lost generation, like Hemingway and that whole group.
Wow!
Yeah,
you got it all sussed out.
Yeah, no, I got you figured out, buddy.
Wow, this is gonna be great. I mean, I'll be constantly in mourning. Why is he so sad? Latest news from America. My country.
That look.
My country. Has anyone suggested to him that maybe he could go back and do something? Oh no, he's too hurt.
That's you. That's it right there.
No. I will go if my country calls. In very clear terms with a financial offer. What?
Wow. Oh, so money. Okay.
Money. Soldier for
That's
hire.
your sole allegiance is money.
No,
wow.
That's not true. I believe in the land of Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and Hamilton and Jackson and Grant
and Benjamin
and
Franklin.
Yes.
Yeah, all on money. Okay.
Well, the new order of the ages, babe. It's right there on the dollar bill. That was fun. Okay, what else we got?
Right. A question from Garrett.
Yeah, Gary.
Garrett.
Oh, Garrett, even better.
Yeah. Charles, can you tell us the history of Christianity in India?
Yes. All right, so what's the next question? What?
There is no history?
No, there is, but he asked me if I could tell it.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't ask me to tell it. He said, could I do it? Yeah, I could do it.
Please do it.
Oh, well, but you're not Garrett. I don't even know Garrett. I know you're not he.
No, but I'm running the show.
There's that. All right. Got me on that one. Got me on that one. Okay, I'll tell all. Christianity came to India with St. Thomas, the apostle.
Oh, okay.
Who evangelized different bits of the country and died near Madras in a place called St. Michael's Mount.
Do they have relics of him there?
Not there, because the relics were later on moved to Italy.
Okay.
But they were there. Although they may have brought a few back, for veneration's sake, the way they do. But the body of the relics was moved to Italy eventually, but the tomb continued to be venerated. He did a lot of evangelization on the opposite coast of India, an area they call now Malabar or Kerala. And the Indian Christians there call themselves Christians of St. Thomas. Well, when the Nestorian church grew out of the Persian Christian church, the churches in India joined it. And there they were until in the 1400s, the Portuguese came. And the Portuguese did two things. They converted a lot of more Indians who became just plain old Latin Rite. The Christians of St. Thomas became Eastern Rite, and the Portuguese attempted to Latinize them somewhat, and there was a big blow-up. And the big blow-up resulted in a big schism. So you had what were called Malabarese Catholics, and you had the others who were called Indian Orthodox and things like that, or Syrian Orthodox. And they sought a connection. They could no longer be connected to the Nestorian church, which had sort of been wiped out by, not entirely, but it was not in communication, shall we say, by the Mongols and so forth. So they ended up going to the people who had held the opposite heresy, the Syriac Orthodox, the Jacobites. So they've got two churches in Malabar, okay, Catholic and Orthodox.
Okay.
But then, because it wouldn't be enough, life being what it is, you then had a split between those Malabar Christians, Orthodox, who wanted to be independent of the Patriarch of Antioch, and those who wanted to stay under him. So now you have three groups, but that's never enough. The British come to India, and they start trying to evangelize, and they do a certain amount, and they create a sort of Protestant church in Malabar called the Martoma Church, so now you've got four. But as we know, that's never enough. So in the 1930s, a group of the Syrian Orthodox, the Malabar Orthodox, came back to the Catholic Church, and they're called Malankaran. So you've got Malabarese Catholics and Malankaran Catholics, or Syro-Malabarese, Syro-Malankaran. So they got five, and there it sits. You've got those guys in Malabar. Meanwhile, in the rest of the country, the Portuguese, and then people the Portuguese converted, keep converting people. So you have Catholics all over the country. Certain areas like Goa, more heavily Catholic than others, Mangalore and places like that. All right. Well, the next step in this great thing is the British come to India, and you've got the French and the Dutch and all that. They all set up their own towns and subsidize their own missionaries. Starting in the 1600s, 1700s, the Propaganda Fidei in Rome sends missionaries to India, and they receive the backing first of the French and then of the British. But this introduces a tension between the clergy of the Portuguese mission and that of the Propaganda. So, the King of Portugal had what was called the Padroado, which meant that in return for financing the church, he could choose the bishops and so forth, and had a certain amount of control. Well, the parishes that were founded by the King of Portugal's missionaries were called Padroado parishes. And you ended up in India in having two hierarchies, Padroado versus the Propaganda. And they were both Catholic,
Yeah.
but politically they had problems. And finally, Leo XIII in the 1880s ordered most of the Padroado parishes to go under propaganda bishops. And the result was something of a schism in certain areas, and that went on for quite a few years. It's almost entirely settled now, but it was a problem. And you also had, under the British, when they had control of India, you had a whole bunch of Protestant missionaries, Anglican, of course, Methodist, Lutheran, Reformed, Presbyterian, and so on. Well, in 1948, 5 of these, including the Anglicans, in southern India, formed the Church of South India, which had bishops and so on. But a lot of Anglo-Catholics thought this was a terrible, terrible thing, because it was subsuming Anglicanism to what they considered Protestantism.
Yeah.
But the same thing happened in the rest of India in 1971 with what was called the Church of North India. So the main bodies then of Christianity in India today are the Catholic Church of the Latin Rite, the Catholic Church of the Malankarian Rite, the Catholic Church of the Malabarese Rite, the Syriac Orthodox and the Indian Orthodox, the Mar Thoma Syrian Church, which is a Protestantized thing, and then the Church of North India and the Church of South India. And there, in a nutshell, is the history of Indian Christianity.
Okay, a couple questions relating to this. Didn't you say something about de Souza?
Yeah.
Is that Portuguese from India?
It's Portuguese from India, yeah.
Yeah, so if you have that name, that's your connection. Because I know one in India,
Yeah.
a good Indian Catholic family with the name de Souza. So I thought that was cool.
Another that's very common is Da Costa.
Da Costa, interesting. Okay, so how successful was St. Thomas initially? Because from a layman, just as a overall feeling, it seems like Catholicism or Christianity never really touched the depths of that culture there.
Well, yeah, that's true and it isn't true in the sense that firstly, you've got to bear in mind that India, in that sense, is a construct of the British. All right?
Why? What do you mean?
It's a ton of different peoples who were different nations, different languages, nothing in common.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the time of St. Thomas. I mean, St. Thomas must have not been that successful.
Well, it was successful enough. You've got to bear in mind that to survive at all without having converted heads of state was amazing.
That's true.
I mean,
what I'm trying to get at is it didn't bear fruit, obviously, in the same way that Europe bore fruit. I mean, that was transformation of Europe.
And Christianity did not transform India. It survived.
It survived.
It survived. It continued, just as in Japan. And that, by itself, was a minor miracle.
Really? Okay. So there was never a history of success of converting the leadership.
Very few. Very, very few. They converted. See, remember, too, part of the problem Christianity has in India is the caste system.
Right.
Because if you have a district and low caste people react to Christianity and say, great, we're real people. We'll go in. Well, then the Brahmins and all of them will say, well. But there are areas of India where the Brahmins converted. So you have Catholic Brahmins in southern India and West India. I know a Catholic convert from Bengal, and he's the only Bengali Brahmin I've ever heard of converting.
Okay.
And I have to say that one thing I learned is that certainly the Archdiocese of Calcutta are not very helpful for converts, because if you want, in Calcutta anyway, I don't know about the rest of India, but in Calcutta, if you want to convert, you have to get notes of approval for this move from your family, which would be hard enough, and from the head of your soon-to-be former religious community.
Why? I don't understand. Why is that a problem?
If you were a Jehovah's Witness and you were going to become a Catholic, do you really think your Jehovah's Witness pastor would write a letter?
Oh, of the former community. Okay, so why does that archdiocese do that?
Well, because there's a lot of anti-Catholicism, anti-Christianity, and one of the charges they make is, oh, they're proselytizing. They're luring people away and so on and so forth. Now, and of course, since we know, modern Catholics know, that membership in the church is not, salvation is not given through membership in the church, it doesn't really matter if you become Catholic or not.
Yeah, just use your conscience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, why suffer problems? Why get into all kinds of political issues over something that's not necessary anyway?
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, just be grateful, of course, your own ancestors did it under the British or the Portuguese.
That's true. Yeah, it's too much like hard work.
Yeah.
And they're fine.
Well, and there could be a riot. We could get hurt.
That's true.
I mean, don't forget parts of India. Orissa State comes to mind. Not that I am putting it out for abuse, but Catholics routinely get murdered and nuns raped and so forth in places like Orissa.
Yeah, that's scary. Best laid low.
Yeah.
You know.
Emphasis on low.
Yeah, we're all approaching perfection anyway, as Desjardins says.
Yeah,
all will be well.
We're all approaching the same place. Many paths to the same place.
Are you? I don't know where you're looking.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Many paths, one location.
Well, as the Jesuit said, that's an abstraction. Right? No, that's a. Did you say metaphor?
Symbol.
Symbol. There we go.
It's a symbol of Jesuits burning in hell forever.
Yeah, symbol. So.
Of Jesuits burning in hell forever.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Sent there by their superior.
Sent there by their. Oh well.
Well, they have to obey.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, moving along. What else we got?
Okay, our final question today is kind of from two different people on the same topic, which is the War of the Vendee.
All right.
All right. Scott Rupert asks, Charles, can you talk about the history of the War of the Vendee? And
no. All right, go ahead.
And what are some books you recommend on it, and the French Revolution in general?
Woof. Well, there's a book called The War of the Vendee, oddly enough. It came out, I believe Michael Davis wrote the foreword, but I cannot for the life of me remember the actual author. I believe it's called The War of the Vendee.
Okay. I'm not familiar.
No. And for the French Revolution in general, the best book I know in English is called Louis XVI, or The End of a World, by Bernard Fay.
Oh, yeah, I know Bernard, yeah.
Spelled F-A-Y umlaut. Fay.
Yeah.
Those are the two best books,
Okay.
Of course, I definitely recommend, if you're, shall we say, audio-visually pointed, Daniel Rabaudin's great film, Hidden Rebellion.
Of course.
And also there are a couple of really good websites on the Vendee, but they're all in French.
Ah. Okay, French guy number one with an additional question. I recently visited the Vendee and was amazed by the heroism of the ordinary Catholics who rose up against the tyranny of the French Revolution. I was also surprised at the lack of discussion of this important period in the history of Catholic France. What started the revolt? Who led it? And what did it achieve?
Well, there were several things. Firstly, the Vendee is the westernmost part of the province of Poitou in France. It's south of Brittany, south of Nantes. In fact, if you want to go there today, you have to fly into Nantes.
It's very rural?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Very rural. I was just there 3 weeks ago in Chavannes.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, I mean, a rural place? I
went to a conference at the Chavannes International School, whose headmaster is my friend Freddie McDermott. I saw Joe Pierce there and Mike Church.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They were at the same conference. And we wandered in the forest of Brocéliande, the great Arthurian Breton forest filled with legends and so on. Funny thing about that, so many places that you wanted to go to since you were a kid, you actually get there and it's like, not this time. I was enchanted. I really fell in love with the place. Anyway, the Vendee itself is very rural. You have all these hedgerows. And unlike a lot of parts of France, many of the nobility were stay-at-homes. Because remember, the great nobility of France, since Louis XIV's time, were attracted to the court, and their various estates where they came from were run by agents.
Yeah.
But in the Vendee, they tended to be stay-at-homes.
Why do you think that was?
Oh, different reasons, I suppose. One of them being the fact that they really didn't. It was not that wealthy an area. I mean, the typical thing is if you're a great nobleman and you want to play a big part in at Versailles, well, you've got to have an estate pumping out dough in some really big area.
I see.
But you know, the Vendee, they had a lot of noble estates, but they weren't going to produce the sort of money where you'd be able to go to Versailles and put on the dog.
Yeah.
At least not more than once or twice a year.
Okay.
So that was part of it, and as a result, the nobility and the people were very, very tight. It was a very devout area, and Saint Louis Marie de Montfort did a lot of evangelizing there. In fact, he's buried in the Vendee. I've been to his tomb.
Of course.
One of the great things about being in Europe, other than not being in America, of course, can we not say things like that? Can we avoid saying nasty things like that? And it's the asides. The asides are the nastiest because it just dropped.
Where's Junipero Serra buried?
He is buried in Carmel, California.
Oh, well,
Or at least that's what they say.
oh, really? It's not for sure.
No, that's really what they say.
Oh, okay. Okay, so anyhow,
But you notice how you jumped on that?
yeah.
All I
Well,
had to do was say, well, that's what they say.
I'm not like others who trust this verbal tradition, this oral tradition.
But this is where we are today. You can make anything sound awful. You know, like, so you say President Grant's buried in Grant's tomb. Well, that's the story, anyway. You know, wait, so do you know something different? Oh, no, I'm sure.
Well, it implies that it's not accessible through traditional channels.
Oh, no,
and that
no.
it's just something.
No, of course not. I don't want to disturb you in your views.
It's like a rumor. The rumor is.
Your beliefs are tightly held, and I don't want to disturb them.
What are you talking about?
Well, I'm sure you absolutely believe Grant is buried in Grant's tomb. And I don't want to disturb you in that belief. I'm sure it must be true.
It is true. Thank you.
Of course it is.
Gosh.
Absolutely. Who would think otherwise? And why?
You're very vexing right now.
Yeah, I know. It's. Anyway, I can only give the world what it gives me, right?
Right.
But no, seriously. So Saint Louis Marie de Montfort evangelized the Vendee. It was a cross in one of the major towns, and he said that when the moss had grown to the top of it, war would break out in the Vendee.
Wow.
And of course it did, in the year that he predicted. But he was out of the picture a lot earlier. The people of the Vendee were extremely pious. Now, just as with other peoples elsewhere, they began to be harassed by the central government in Paris. First, you had the overthrow of the king. Well, no, but before that, before the overthrow of the king, you have the civil constitution of the clergy, which basically makes the church in France subject to the revolutionary authorities.
Yeah.
Well, if you refused to swear to it, you'd lose your parish, and you became a criminal automatically.
Yeah.
So that's what happened to the Vendee.
What part of it couldn't you swear to?
Well, basically, if you swore to it, if you took the oath to the civil constitution of the clergy, you were putting the French government over the Pope.
Oh.
Which they couldn't do.
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing is, even some of the priests and bishops who had been the most Gallican, very independent toward Rome, wouldn't do it. Because, there's a difference between faith and politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like today. If I don't care how you feel about Pope Francis, if I said, well, you've got to sign this oath saying that the United States government has more authority over the Catholic Church than the Pope does, if you had any guts at all, you'd go to the barricades for it.
Of course.
Because it's not about him.
Right.
And even if you had been pushing for all kinds of autonomy for the Church of the United States, you wouldn't want to sign something like that. You see?
I get it now.
So, and mind you, a lot of people did, don't get me wrong, but what always interests me in anything like this, the Reformation or anything else, are the people who had every reason to go the other way, but wouldn't.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who, you look and you see, well, they wouldn't go along with it. And there are often people who wouldn't go along with anything like that. You got to basically blow their brains out. Other than that, to hell with you.
Yeah.
Then you have people who go along with whatever. Okay, boss, I'm going to wear my underwear on my head now because that's what you told me. Well, okay, between those two, you have any number of interesting variations. And the people who would have every reason to go along but don't, they're the ones I'm always fascinated by in every similar political or historical episode. Like the bishop in Iceland, who had 7 sons and all that, and a terrible bishop and a terrible Catholic. But he would not give up the faith.
Wow. Nor
would his sons, even though they would have been legitimized, and the oldest of them could have become bishop after his dad.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people I find really heroic.
Yeah.
So, what should happen? But that most of the parish priests in the Vendee refused to take the oath, and so they went into hiding and became criminals. That was the first step that began the disaffection.
Yeah.
All right. Then the king is overthrown. Now, one of the leaders of the Vendee, and I don't remember which one, because there were quite a few of them. There was Catelino, there was Le Rocheclin, Lesqueux. There were a whole lot of them. But one I remember in particular was a peasant, and he was his mother's only son. His mother was a widow, and he was caught smuggling salt, which was a capital offense. This is before the revolution.
Wow.
So his mother, before he can be executed, his mother goes all the way to Paris, to Versailles, rather. She buttonholes Louis XVI in the garden of Versailles and begs for her son's life. She says, he's all I have.
Yeah.
And if you kill him, I'll starve.
Yeah.
And the king pardoned her. So she goes back to the Vendee in time to wave the pardon to the jailer's face and takes her son away. Well, the king is executed by the revolution, and now his son, in prison, who would become the last Dauphin, is Louis XVII. Then, to add insult to injury, France is invaded by the Austrians and Prussians and so forth, so they decide to put in a draft of troops. All of the young men have to go fight for the revolution.
Wow.
Well, now let's see. You put our priests into hiding, you have killed our king, and now you think you're going to come here and take our sons? No, you're not. And that was the beginning of the rising in the Vendee. And it spread not just in the Vendee, but in western Brittany and Maine and Anjou and all sorts of places. There were different names for the rebels. They had in the south of France as well. But basically, it was all the same kind of cause. The Vendee, however, received the worst treatment because in response, the fellow with whom I was speaking, he said, all right, I'm up for it. And he led troops in the revolt. And they asked him, why? You're a peasant. You get what again? I owe my life to my king.
Wow.
If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here. So the least I can do is fight for his son. And they called themselves the Catholic Royal Army. And the nobility, in one case, this nobleman was sitting in a chateau, and his tenants formed a mob, and they came up to the chateau. Now, in the usual Hollywood movies, they'd be there to storm the chateau and sack it.
Yeah.
That wasn't it. They came to demand that he lead them against the revolution.
Ah.
And he said, I will lead you, but we will not win. So I only want those with me who are willing to die. Wow. And off they went. Another one who was very much in my mind, Le Rocheclin. He was a young man. He was 18. He'd been a guard. He was a nobleman. He was probably the youngest of the leaders. And he, when they were going to go into battle the first time, he said, if I charge forward, follow me. If I retreat, shoot me.
Whoa.
So these were pretty intense people.
Yeah.
Well, they were defeated, and the vengeance that was taken on them was horrible. Robespierre gave the order that they should simply be wiped out, men, women, and children. And they were. They would burn them in churches, men, women, and children. They would take men and women, tie them together, and throw them into rivers. Call them Republican marriages.
Yeah, I saw that on Hidden Rebellion. Weren't they naked as well?
Yeah. And you go there now, and you could still feel the horror. It was pretty miserable. And then, in 1815, the king had come back in 1814. 1815, Napoleon rises again and takes the country over. The Vendee rises again against him, and are defeated. In 1830, King Charles X is overthrown, Louis XVI's youngest brother. And 2 years later, the Vendee rises again under the leadership of his daughter-in-law.
How are they hanging around so long? I always
No, it goes in families.
Oh, it goes in families. Okay.
And similarly, interesting enough, you remember I wrote a book on the Papal Zouaves. Well, one of the big recruiting grounds for the Zouaves in France was the Vendee. And it's interesting, names like Le Rocheclin and Charlotte de la Contrie that were big, and Bonchamp, who were big in the Vendee Rising, were also big in the Zouaves. Because these traditions were handed down in these families. And to this day, to this very day, I know of a descendant of one of the leaders of the Vendee Rising who still treasures the flag that his multiple great ancestor had in the Vendee. I've seen it.
The actual cloth?
Yeah.
Handed down, wow.
There are holes in it, covered with blood.
Wow.
And the commission that it should be returned to the king when he's restored.
Wow.
And when the last direct descendant of Charles X, the Count of Chambord, Henry V, died in 1883, the then member of the family who had the flag took it to Frosdorf in Austria, and it covered the coffin of Chambord. And on the mantelpiece in that chateau, I have seen with these eyes a fleur de lis in yellowish wax, and that was wax from the candles that were at Chambord's funeral.
Wow.
Wow, indeed. It, you go into these places and you meet these people, and it's just...
Very emotional.
Yep.
Well, I don't even know what to say, but that's, we're finished with the episode.
Well, that's the faith. If we want to go to heaven, or if we want to make a better earth, that's the faith we have to try to cultivate in ourselves. At the end of the day, nothing is won by a faint heart. Nothing is won by halfway measures. Nothing is won by a lack of loyalty. And even if you have the very best leaders and the best heart, you may still lose, as the Vendee shows. But that's only a loss on this side. All of those folk that did so much then, I have no doubt are saints in heaven now. And that, at the end of the day, for all of us, is the real victory. Whatever happens here, however it happens. The reverse is also true. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine, what kind of conversation he had with a leading European Freemason who was going on and on and on about the many victories over the church and the faithful that they've had in recent years. I won't bore you with details, but after he told me all this, I said, I have to admit, if I were in your shoes, I would have said to him, a fat lot of good, all that victory over the church and ruin for Catholics is going to bring you when you're frying in hell. Laugh, guy, laugh now, because you won't get the chance on the other side. And the same is true for us. Weep here. Weep here, because if we stay loyal and we stay true, then we'll have an eternity of joy and happiness beyond us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll do it.
That'll do it for this week. I am going back to Austria early next week. By the time you see this, I'll still be home. But I'll be leaving the next day. So by the time you see this, we're actually going to be doing my last at-home episode. And you know what that means? It'll actually be Monday.
Yeah.
And if it's Monday?
It's off the menu.
And the soul you save?
May be your own.
God bless you, ladies and gentlemen.